All right, beautiful souls, divine beings, whether or not you know it. Welcome back to another episode of Universe the Game. This one's going to be about the second density, okay? This one's important because it's right where you came from, and also to understand how sentient life works upon the planet will give you a massive, massive advantage in understanding everything and connecting to that. Therefore, your connection to your own divinity will be much easier to receive because you realize that you're connected to everything else. So when you remove that separation, you see that you are everything else in one sense. Obviously, we are still limited in the body, okay? But we're gonna get into how all that works today. All right, so second density. And one thing that I really haven't hit too much on for this part of the series, the Law of One series, is that this is about understanding that the universe, this thing that we're all experiencing, we call it the universe. And in this universe, it's a game of some sort that we play with other versions of ourselves in order to learn about ourselves. But really, our means your, because there really is no plural in the ultimate truth. But how we refer to that is in the plural sense. I haven't said plural in a long time. Interesting word. Say that 3 times fast. I know it doesn't seem hard, but it is. But it is. All right, so let's get into the slides already. Oh, man. I love it. Okay, so we have second density here. So how this thing works, it's the same thing as what I talked about yesterday. You have all the different, you have the octave. Okay, we are in an octave. We have all the different densities. We went through how the first density is that of consciousness, or the first density of consciousness, as everything really is consciousness, but that's what the Law of One refers to it as, so that's why I put it on the dang poster in that word. Okay, so when we're looking at the second density, the density of growth, I think it also says growth in light, technically in the Law of One, but I really feel like growth is the pivotal understanding that as we spiral up, just think of consciousness as kind of spiraling up, and it gets to spiral up however it wants, but it still spirals up. Eventually, inevitably, it will spiral up. If it takes an infinite amount of time, it still will. And what does spiral up mean? It means get to a higher vibration. That's essentially what it means. Just to raise your frequency. All right, so when we look at second density, it's pretty much everything that's not just earth, water, air, and fire. Okay, it's moving things that have, I guess you could say, the things that just move around. Like you have, obviously, your fish, all your pets are going to be your higher plant life. You're going to have anything, even, your trees, your garden, your flowers. I mean, everything that moves that's not human is considered second density. All right. But that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean that if you are an ET race, you're second density. No, what I'm saying is that when you don't have that ability to reflect, to critically think, that self-reflection, that spirit, the potentiality of spirit, it hasn't been realized yet. It doesn't need to gain it. It just hasn't been activated. You don't activate that until you get into third density. So that's the real difference between second and third density here. Okay, so second density is going to be 4.6 billion years. Okay, that's a lot. It's the longest. I think it is the longest. You see, it gets progressively shorter to third density. Then we have 75,000 year cycle. Then it gets progressively longer again. But as I've been studying, the relativity of time is very different than how we perceive it here on Earth. And if you wanted a very simple understanding of this, is if you think about the movie Interstellar, all right? I'm sure most of us have seen it. If you haven't, highly recommend it, all right? There's a lot of interesting side notes, side disclosure that we see in that movie. Of course, there's going to be distortion in some ways and pretty much anything. But the really interesting part about Interstellar is that when they go to that other planet, and an hour passes for them and like I don't even remember how many, like 20 years. Let's say it's 20 years, might be 40, could be longer. Like 20 or 40 years. I know that's a big difference, but just imagine for the concept that 1 hour passes where they are and 40 years passes where on Earth. That's the relativity of time, that it depends on where you are in the universe. So don't think about it like it's going to be 4.6 billion years in the way that we experience time, because time is experienced differently. It can go faster and slower. And so don't get too caught up in the dates and be like, oh man, that's a lot of years. I don't know if I can do that. It's not that long. It's really not that long. Okay. So, wrong button. Let's continue on. So high second density moving into third are mostly beings that come in contact with humans. All right. And so what that really means is a topic I've hit on a couple times, but I just think it's good to put it in here because it's one of the most important concepts to understanding your connectivity to everything and your ability to help the planet, whether or not you feel like you're doing something in terms to help humans. You're still helping consciousness evolve, even at the simplest levels, by having pets. Because one, having pets is actually a selfless act. I don't know if you realize that, especially having a dog of my own. That, sometimes you're receiving that love back, but they can't take care of you in the way that you take care of them. And it's a lot of green ray, unconditional love that they give you and you give them. So it's actually very cohesive and helpful for both humans and dogs, because dogs and cats and animals that come into contact with humans get to evolve. But at the same time, we get to evolve from opening up our green ray center in the process, which is, part of the plan. Okay. So as we move into the next, it's basically because when you have a personality, that is what really activates the yellow ray energy. Yellow ray is based upon, if you studied the chakra system, a lot of the times it's based on willpower and discipline and how you perceive others around you. It's a lot of societal things. Even if it is willpower, a lot of the times that has to do with society and what's happening in it. And when that starts to become more activated, eventually you'll activate that center enough to where you'll move into the third density. And right now, we are beings that, of course, we can activate all the energy centers within the body, but we're learning how to activate and fully sustain. This is what New Earth is in one sense, how to sustain the fourth chakra, fourth ray energy center through love. And once we do that, that's essentially the key to getting into the fourth density, because the fourth density is the density of love and understanding. So it all fits together. So this is a part of the law of one I'm going to read to you because I think it's really relevant. Okay. So this is from session 19, question 2. Questioner. Let's take the point at which an individualized entity of second density is ready for transition into the third. Is this second density being what we would call animal? Ra. I am Ra. There are 3 types of second density entities which become, shall we say, inspirited. The first is the animal. This is the most predominant. Second is the vegetable, most especially that which you call sound vibration complex tree. These entities are capable of giving and receiving enough love to become individualized. The third category is mineral. Occasionally a certain location, place as you may call it, becomes energized to individuality through the love it receives and gives in relationship to a third density entity, which is in relationship to it. So third density gives it some, it receives. This is the least common though. So places that I can see that happening would be like Machu Picchu or Glastonbury or some areas in India and probably Sedona, specific areas. Yeah, I know that's hard to visualize, but that doesn't happen very often. Very, very rare. So another part. This is the next question in the same session. Questioner. When this transition from second to third density takes place, how does the entity, whether it be animal, tree, or mineral, become inspirited? Ra. Entities do not become enspirited. They become aware of the intelligent energy within each portion, cell, or atom, as you may call it, of its beingness. This awareness is that which is awareness of that already given. From the infinite come all densities, from the infinite. The self-awareness comes from within, given the catalyst of certain experiences and understanding. As we may call this particular energy, the upward spiraling of the cell or atom or consciousness. So that's basically all I'm saying in the beginning of this episode. The consciousness spirals. All right, and as it spirals, the awareness begins to take place, and when it does, then it moves on. As you realize your awareness, that you are love, that's essentially the third to fourth transition, and we'll talk about that tomorrow, probably. You may then see that there is an inevitable pull towards the, what you may call, eventual realization of self. Okay, and this is just another quote from a different session. There is nothing random about this or any portion of evolution. That everything, this is super important because this helps you realize that everything is planned. Everything. From your life to your life lessons. And of course, there's going to be things that happen, but we find a lot of the times that happens due to the nature in which you interact with the reality. And it's pretty much a combination between how you interact within the reality and also how you are behaving. And I guess that's kind of the same thing. I was thinking of one more thing, but I can't remember off the top of my head as we're live, right? So anyways, if it comes to me, we'll get back to it. There was one more point there. So from my research on the soul/spirit world, this directly correlates with the graduation of second density. So, we'll get into that. In my second part of Dr. Michael Newton's Journey of Souls, that's a Universe Game episode that I'm talking about, I covered the part in which there are soul mothers who help with the births of new souls from a source, or the source. To me, this is what happens when you've graduated into the realm of spirit. You are born into the soul world at this point. Okay, so what I'm getting at there is that you are born into the spirit or soul world once you've graduated from second density. I feel like that's a different environment in the soul world. And if you read the part in the Journey of Souls that I'm talking about, or maybe it's even Destiny of Souls, which is the second book. And in that case, there's a part in which there's basically this wall of source, and the beings are born through the wall, all in different spots, never the same spot. And then they're taken and they're taken care of, and then they get to the point where you're at right now. So that's how you're born into this part. And essentially, that's what I believe is happening when we speak of the born again type talk, that you're kind of reborn every time, even when you start to see the world a different way, you're reborn into a new level of awareness. It's almost like raising your level of consciousness. That's how the religious sense kind of plays out that word to me. So, and this is just a side note that I actually found super interesting. So if you've ever heard of the Maldek entities. Okay, so a little background before I get into this. Maldek was the planet that is currently the asteroid belt, and this is one name for it. Some people call it other things, but in the Law of One, it refers to it as Maldek. So when that planet was destroyed, this question is about how that planet's entities went about their business on Earth. Okay, so session 10, question 3. Questioner. And have any of the Maldek entities transformed now? Are they now still second density, or are they forming some third density planet now? So, Ra, The consciousness of these entities has always been third density. The alleviation mechanism was designed by this placement of the consciousness in second dimensional physical chemical complexes, which are not able to be dexterous or manipulative to the extent which is appropriate to the workings of third density distortions of the mind complex. So what's happening is that Maldek got destroyed and they were in third density. So then as a karmic alleviation, they got put into second density bodies, but they were still third density. Oh. The slides froze for a sec. Okay. There it is. Anyways, so that's really interesting to me. The fact that that's how karma plays out for a whole civilization. And we'll get into how I need to do a whole separate video on Maldek. And I thought that was interesting because what they're saying is that the beings that we know as ape on this planet are beings from Maldek still. And that's how the alleviation of that karma is being played out on this planet, is that they're not able to manipulate like they were on that planet objects because that's how they pay it back. So super fascinating stuff about that. And you can see that we have a lot in common in terms of DNA to the ape. And I think it's a pretty high percentage. It's a very high percentage of the same DNA. And so in that respect, what separates us from them in the law of one terms, to me, is having that awareness, having that third density awareness versus the second density awareness. Because in the second density body, you can only become aware of second density workings. And then when you become aware of third density, that's when you move on to the next one. So anyways, that's a little bit off topic, but I found it super fascinating. And we'll get into Maldek eventually. But that's going to be it for today's, because I feel like that's the most important part about second density. Again, we're keeping it short and sweet. That second density moves on to the third through human intervention in a lot of ways. They don't have to. There are other beings that have moved on without human intervention. But a lot of the times that's what it takes to move on into the third, because the individuation process happens. And a lot of the times when we look at birds and they're all flying in the same pattern, they're part of that bird hive mind. It's kind of like that bird is a soul. Not just that one bird, but that whole group of birds. They're group souls. So when you're looking at a bunch of cows in a field, that's actually one soul that you're looking at, because that's what it will become in a sense. It will become one soul. And that's what's determined as a group soul. It's a bunch of mind-body complexes that incarnated into it split itself up so that it could incarnate into, let's say, 10 cows, because it didn't need to save its energy for anything, because like in the third density, of course, you're still going to have, and in the third density, you're still going to have some energy always in the spirit world. And it's probably the same in second density. I've never read anything about the second density like that, but that's what I would assume. So when we get into third density, you divide your energy in a very particular way. And that actually determines a lot, as we discussed in Journey of Souls, that determines a lot about how well you do in this life, is how much energy of your soul or your spirit complex you brought in. Or it would be a combination of mind, body, spirit, but just on a different level. It's not physical spirit in that sense. But when you get incarnate, that's a different story. So anyways, that will do it for today on second density. Tomorrow, we will get into third density, and there's so much to cover in the third density. I'm not sure where I'll start, but I'm going to make the slides tonight, and then I will get into it, figure it out, and I'll bring you at least the first part of third density. We're going to have to split the third density probably into a lot of videos, because we're in the third density. When I look at the law of one, I look at how many different things are said about the third density, and obviously it's going to be a lot, because that's the experience that is the most relevant to you right now. So I'll pick the topic, I'll get into it tonight, and then we'll talk about it on tomorrow's episode of Universe, the game.